Vitolo Haddad. Okay, CV, followed by Evelyn Gildry Boyles.
Let's go CV.
Oh dear.
Hello, my name is CV Vitolo Haddad. I direct the debate program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I'm here today to ask you to oppose renewing the contract that would keep cops in our schools. I'm disturbed to hear from the few people today who would rather stir up fear than sit down and review the data on this matter. Fear is a powerful motivator, and it's one that gives us an easy emotional release from the cognitive pressure of making difficult decisions, especially when it seems like there's no right answer. Life is precarious, and especially these days, evil abounds us. But we must not answer fear with more fear. We must not compound tragedy with tragedy by displacing the natural precarity of life onto our black and brown students, such that a small minority of the audience might feel safer. But this plea is empty without data to support it, so let's review the data. We can start close to home for me, just miles away from my parents live. Scott Peterson, who spent most of his life in law enforcement as a school resource officer, remained outside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, while a teenager armed with an AR-15 killed 14 students and 3 teachers. But anecdotes are not data, not when it's used to fearmonger, and not when it supports the points that I like either. A 2009 study by Michael Throat at the University of Tennessee compared student arrests and court records across schools. Controlling for socioeconomic status, the researcher found that there wasn't a difference in serious crimes between those who had school resource officers and those that didn't. Students policed at schools were much more likely to get arrested than unpoliced schools, but they weren't any more likely to be actually charged. In other words, students are policed at schools, but they weren't likely to be, or they were arrested, but they weren't charged because there was rarely evidence to convict them or charge them with the crime. This is exactly the problem that's led some juvenile judges to speak out against police in our schools. The chief judge in juvenile court in Clayton County, Georgia, for example, told Congress at a 2012 hearing that school resource officers meant that prosecutors' attention was taken away from more difficult evidentiary and scary cases like burglary, car thefts, and aggravated assaults, to prosecuting kids that weren't scary but had made an adult mad somewhere along the line. Bolstering their arrest rates was apparently more important than the nature of the crime or the damage the prosecution would do to the educational environment. And there's more. The National Center for Education Statistics says that victimization, which is theft and violent crime, has dropped 72% over the last 20 years, and that those trends hold consistent even absent educational resource officers, absent police dogs, and absent metal detectors. And armed resource officers aren't cheap, and in this era of declining resources in public education, school resource officers and any armed professionals come at the expense of other investments: smaller class sizes, more teachers with better pays and rewards to develop their craft, more paraprofessionals to assist teachers, and expanded tutoring services for students who fall behind. I understand the fear, and I know these are scary times, and I promise I'll wrap up in the next 5 seconds. But we can't seek to beat evil into submission by incorrectly locating it in the bodies of black and brown children. Please support Freedom Youth, and please establish a dialogue with the community members who push for us to get cops in schools and who have other options for how to decrease violence.